I was about 21 or something when that happened. And it was such an astounding thing that this knowing had arisen from my body. I was involved in an exercise where I was sharing center of gravity with another person. And I think there was something about that was very important about having this experience. It was about coming together with another. And so right from that moment, I realized, okay, I'm an improviser. I'm a dance improviser, and this is what I'm going to explore. And that set me on my course, and that's 40 years ago already. And I think it was really that experience was the catalyst for recognizing that there was an intelligence, an embodied intelligence that I wanted to explore. I wanted to listen, and it felt it was very connected to the fact that I realized that I was not separate from the whole. I was not separate from life, and therefore life, was speaking through my body. So that's really what and that has my path opened up from that beginning experience, and I went on to study Aikido for some years, and also spiritual disciplines. But for me, it was always, I wasn't interested in becoming a good dancer, a good Aikido practitioner. It was, or a good spiritual person. It was to do with the principles. I really wanted to learn about the deeper principles of life, and ask questions about life. And so my moving has been an expression of all of that. And so that's what I've done all these years. And yeah.
Well, I think you describe it beautifully, and it resonates a lot, I think, with my own experience in terms of that process. And I think we could speak a little bit more about that, where you went through a disciplined approach to the body in terms of controlling or dominating the body in order to get it to do what you wanted it to do. And I think when I lived in Japan for many years and studying Aikido in the founder's school with a highly skilled technician, that approach was paramount. It was about getting the body to do exactly what the framework was about, what the skill level was about, the techniques, and applying and disciplining and mastering the body in order to acquire these skills. And there was this, in a way, false notion that in order to get to an authentic expression of body, to get to an authentic expression of the art, you had to master the techniques so much that they just became automatic, and then you were just kind of on automatic mode. And my insight, very similar to yours, was a realization that there was a moment back in after I had left Japan where I was studying and working with a student, and we turned out all the lights, and we put some music on, and we allowed the Aikido to happen spontaneously. And something happened where I applied a technique and he landed on the ground, and I didn't do it. And he was as surprised as I was. And we both said at that, it was complete pitch dark in the school. And we both said at the same time, who did that? And it was in that opened up to this recognition of a physicality, of an intelligence that functions not only through our minds in meditation and insight that spontaneously arises from letting go of conditioned belief patterns and conditioned holding patterns, but and that insight that shows up spontaneously, which feels so natural and so authentic, but that there was a domain through the body that functioned in the same way, that there was an intelligence that functioned in an appropriate and responsive, systemic or integrated fashion with the world around. And that intelligence was something that was inherent. It wasn't developed. it was uncovered, it was allowed, it was engaged. And of course, I'm not in recognizing that I'm not denying the value of learning basic skills or drawing, developing those technical capacities that every art has to a certain degree, whether you're a musician, dancer, or martial artist. But that mastery was really about letting go rather than adding on or developing more. And that was a radical shift in the Aikido, because it mirrored my experiences that had occurred in meditation, that had occurred in the realm of insight, that had occurred at the level of letting go of cognitive biases, of holding patterns in the mind, and identity structures, and recognizing that awareness is something inherent and when allowed, functions beautifully and effortlessly without needing to evaluate or to control. But there was a domain in the body that had the same quality and the same taste that I had recognized in meditation. And that's, I think, is exactly what you're pointing to, this sense of discovering something that had already been and just needed to be allowed. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
Yeah, it does. Absolutely. And I just want to respond to one thing when you said about that, it is important to have basic skills.
Sure.
Basic technical skills. So for instance, with the body, it's important to know, about the basic anatomy, the spine, the front, the back, sides, and so on. But what I felt was the message that I was being given when I did my traditional training was that basically, until I had learned to do all these brilliant things, I was kind of rubbish. I was not worth anything until I learned to perfect all these things.
Right.
Whereas this other thing, this other perspective that you're talking about is where you look at our connection to everything and you go, this is who we are.
Yes.
Right. It's incredible. We don't know what the body is. Let's explore it. And along the way, we can learn techniques, but we can have a lot of fun learning techniques.
Yes. Yeah.
They don't mean anything about our identity.
Right.
As who we are as dancers or anything else. we're not out to prove anything to anybody. We already are. You know what I mean?
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah.
Absolute. I mean, the how we function. Yes, now with modern science, we've picked apart so we do know how extraordinary it is. But do we really know that? We know it from here, because we hear scientists talking about it. But do we really know it as the home that we live in for the time that we're on this earth?
Right.
And that's the interesting. Yeah.
I think we've heard that message, that part of the spiritual life, or spiritual, the perspective of a spiritual understanding was the discovery of how to be in the right place at the right time. And but when the body is allowed and that body intelligence is activated, it becomes a visceral experience of learning how to be in the right place at the right time with the environment that it's in. And that occurs so much faster than the mind is too slow to allow that to occur in the instantaneous responsiveness that is explored through contact, whether it's dance or Aikido, and how that functions in a moment by moment experience that feels so true, so obviously appropriate, not conceptually analyzed as being right or wrong, but an obvious appropriateness, and that sense of freedom that comes with that. And a sense of being immersed and connected with the world around is that experience is a result of that. In my experience, was a result of that letting go of that needing to control, which I had also been told through my schools. You need to control in order to get where you want. You need to control. You need to acquire the more techniques, the more information, the more you can, and I had gone through that phase. I had spent 7 years in Japan. I had studied Aikido techniques inward and outward, and had really gone through the gamut. And I realized I was not going to get to where I wanted to be just by practicing more technique. And that sense of letting that narrative go was an allowing for something else to show up. And I think there is something there that's incredibly important to recognize from the onset when you start any type of discipline. If a student comes into an Aikido school, and oftentimes the message can be, as you reflected, can be said to that student, you have nothing. I have all the techniques that you want. I have all the information that you want. I have all the tradition that you want. I will give that to you over time. And then generally you will grow into a valuable individual. But now you are not valuable. You're down here, and later on you'll be up here. And it puts a false sense of self-worth onto that student. And then of course they try to climb that ladder of identity or of self-worth through the acquisition of techniques. And it puts a weird power structure between teacher and student, rather than the teacher saying, look, what you're searching for, you already have. It's already part of your system. Now, I can give you different practices, different techniques, different ways of exploring that to allow you to be able to appreciate that domain of yourself more naturally, to allow that to become more consciously expressed, to become another domain of your experience. I can help with that, but I can't give that to you because you already have that. And that, I think, changes the narrative and allows the teacher and the student to meet more as fundamental equals. And the teacher is now as a facilitator of accessing this intelligence, rather than a giver of that wisdom. And therefore the student becomes dependent on the teacher in that sense of the teacher acknowledging their self-worth, acknowledging their value in the group, who they are in the sense of being an important person or a non-important person in the company or in the school or in the process. And I think that's a very valuable shift in the way we could communicate what it means to grow and evolve in a body discipline.
Well, I think, unfortunately, at this point in our evolution as the human species, at least in the West, our training through school from the very beginning is one of this perspective on life, and it's a what it comes from really is a misunderstanding of actually the nature of life, really, and our connection to it. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So we don't understand that we really are an integral part of it.
Yes,
so,
exactly.
Therefore, of course, everything's there if you're an integral part of it. Right. How could it be otherwise? But because at this point, there's still this misunderstanding, then our training is this one. This one where you have to build all the time. You have to become all the time. Right. And you just look around at the mess that the world's in, what we're doing to the planet, and you understand the abuse of power, exactly as you've just, you've talked about that right there in the relationship with teacher, and this abuse of power that can come about because we're not trained to trust ourselves. We're trained to acquire expertise and knowledge, and then we're somebody, you know what I mean? Right. So because our training has been that from the very get-go, it feels like we have to take a big risk to let go of that. That's what it feels like. To let go of that feels like taking a huge risk. But of course, whose arms are you going to fall into? When you do that, you're going to fall into the arms of life. There's no other, you know what I mean? Or people call it whatever they want to call it.
Right.
But it feels like the biggest, scariest thing to let go of this identification with you know, the things that we've built up our
the
whole
things
life.
that we've acquired, and identifying with what we've acquired. And it's a doomed process, because as we engage in that type of practice, we acquire certain skills, we acquire certain modalities, certain techniques, certain things, and those things come and go, right? We have the skill of being able to do a particular movement, and then as the body either gets injured or ages, we lose that skill, and then we feel less than. It's like, well, I used to be able to do that, now I can't.
Yeah.
And yet when we access the principles underneath those techniques, when we access that living quality intelligence and the perspective that can appreciate it, what I found is whether I can do something from the past or not doesn't limit my capacity to respond in this moment. And my capacity is always without limit. So there's a limitless nature to the freedom that this body experiences when it's resonating with itself. But when it's comparing itself to somebody else or to something in the past, it's always, how much do I have? How much have I lost? And where do I meet? And this type of acquisitorial nature to the process limits that recognition of the true freedom that my system has, not just only in the cognitive state of shift in perspective that can occur in meditation, and not only just in the emotional nature of compassion and love, but in the actual physical creativity, the physical dynamic that flows through my system. And it's a recognition of the way I put it, an energy that exists in the body that has no age. There's a quality about the body that has no age. Of course, the body does age itself, the structure and the domain, but there's a nature of something that fundamentally functions at the source of who I am, that literally is not defined by age, not defined by the age that my body is at. And in that place, there is a limitless capacity of expression and creativity, which is extraordinary to feel. And then the art blossoms, because at any point in time, the possibilities for creation are literally limitless. And so I don't miss the past, in the sense that the joy of discovering creativity exists as much now as it did in the past, as it did when I first started. In fact, I appreciate it more than I did when I was a beginner in the discipline. I don't know if that makes sense or not.
Yeah. It does make sense. I mean, one of the things I was thinking about, which I find it fascinating, and it is like a dance in itself, is that my conditioned mind is still busy with all this. You know what I mean? Like right now, I haven't taught or danced for a year and a half or something. I mean, I've done a few things online, but that's it. But I'm going to go in person and teach, you know, and it's a year and a half later. I'm a year and a half older. I've had quite a serious illness in that time, which I'm luckily, you know, I'm healing from. And I'm going to go teach in person. My conditioned mind's going, you're crazy. You're not going to be able to do anything. It's the same stuff, you know.
Yes, right.
So the fascinating thing is not to let that stop one. Just to continue, and then you find out. You know what I mean? You go through the experience, and then you have the knowledge that you're talking about. The knowledge that you're talking about reveals itself. You know what I mean? And that I find very interesting. Very interesting. You know, this dance, because the conditioned mind still does gets up to all its tricks. You know, and
you know, would perhaps, I think it'd be valuable if you said a few things about, if you don't mind sharing a little bit about what you faced in this last year, because I think it's quite extraordinary what the story that you faced. If you would share a little bit about that.
Yeah. So ironically, it was March 2020, and it was exactly at the time of the first lockdown, coronavirus lockdown. I was basically diagnosed with breast cancer. And I was living in the States at the time. Not only was I diagnosed with breast cancer, I was diagnosed as being a BRCA, BRCA, BRCA2 gene mutation carrier. And I don't know if you remember, any of you, Angelina Jolie.
Mhm.
Some people would know what, you know, her story, because that's the BRCA gene, which makes you susceptible to breast and ovarian cancer in women. And then men can get breast cancer also, actually, and also the other cancer that you get. Yeah, I'm
Yes.
spacing out on it. But anyway, there you go.
Right.
So anyway, so I was diagnosed with that, and I actually had to make very fast decisions because of the lockdown about my treatment, you know, and I ended up having double mastectomy and my ovaries taken.
Mm.
And the amazing thing was, well, number one was the recognition that I was going through, you know, facing my own mortality, and the same time as millions of people around the world were basically facing the same fear of death because of the COVID thing. And that was an extraordinary thing to me. The other thing that I felt was my own, I mean, even though I have the BRCA gene, which makes me susceptible to cancer, if you had the BRCA gene back in the 1930s, it was something like a 17% chance you'd get cancer. If you have the BRCA gene now, it's like a 78% chance that you're going to get cancer, which is because of the environment, you know, environmental issue, the environment. So I realized that my own illness was completely connected to the climate. You know what I mean? It's not, I couldn't disconnect it.
Right.
And somehow that gave me the strength and courage to go, okay, I'm facing this thing, you know, and I'm going to make every effort to heal myself as part of healing the planet. You know? And it was very much, I felt that my practice over all these years that sustained me through, and you know, because it was in lockdown, I was alone. I don't have a partner or anything, so I was alone. I had to go through everything by myself, making the decisions myself. I reached out to people, of course, but it was something about my practice that sustained me, so that I, you know, with the improvisation, when you go into an improvised performance, the first thing is you accept what comes to you, right? And then you you face into it. You don't retreat from it. You face into it. Always you head into it, and then this intelligence starts to kick in, which is, we were talking about that before, right, where you're making these decisions. So I was doing that through those months, through those weeks before I had my treatment, and beyond that. And I actually had the same sense of joy, which sounds very bizarre, but I had the same sense of joy of like facing into this thing that life had thrown at me. And that was really remarkable to me. Like, it blew my mind. The other thing that blew my mind was that fundamentally nothing in me changed. This is just simply what happened in my life, and I've gone through it. And I suddenly realized, whoa, damn. Because before, if I heard anybody had cancer, I'd be like, you know, and immediately they became someone that had cancer. They became someone different from me. They became someone who was sick, and I was not sick. I was well. And I went, wow, all of this is actually our fear of death manifesting, you know, being projected onto others and creating these separations and divisions. And that was also a huge learning, you know, which is a very important one, I think, because we can make people sick by projecting on them that they're sick, you know, by alienating people, by doing all of that. Right. And I do think, again, you know, I don't know, the pandemic, because it's hit all of us. It's not just this. I mean, I know there are some groups that are more susceptible and all of that, which is, you know, we have to look at. It's pointing to what's wrong, but fundamentally, you know what I mean? It's hit us all, and we're all in the same thing. So anyway, yeah.
You know, we had a few calls during that period of time, and I was always touched by your capacity to both experience the difficulty and the challenge and express that authentically, and at the same time not lose your perspective in a global sense about what is valuable and where you're wanting to go. And you seem to be able to balance both an authentic vulnerability in the expression of what was happening, as well as a clarity of what the direction that your life was taking. and you didn't lose yourself in the process. And I was very impressed and touched by that.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
But I think there's definitely I attribute that to my practice. You know, that practicing that perspective always with the
right.
improvising, like, trying to keep as big a perspective as you can, as opposed to just, you know, the personal response to things is always there, but not just going to that place.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? I mean,
Yeah.
if that had happened with my cancer, I would have, like, you know, devolved into kind of like self-pity probably.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you know, obviously there was fear. Of course there's fear,
Yeah.
you know, but you know,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think, there's a, a, a parallel, and I think this, whether or not this stimulated some of the reason why we're getting together and talking about this. Although we had done, was it 3 years ago that we had done the event in France together?
Yeah, yeah.
I think so. And our conversations, immediately went to this topic. But what I think that conversation really brought about for myself a realization of something that became very visceral and very tangible along the lines of what I think the theme of our work is going to be this October, and the theme of this conversation tonight. And I'd like to share with you and get your feedback on that. But in March, at that same time, at the beginning of COVID, I was scheduled to do a seminar in Italy, and I was about to leave, and I got sick. And I this was before anybody was testing for COVID, but for me, I'm fairly certain that it was COVID. It knocked me out for 2 weeks. It hit me harder than anything I'd ever gotten before, and it just tapped me out in such a way that I lost a tremendous amount of motivation and energy to engage. And as I was coming out of it, and the lockdown ensued, and the whole event of staying at home, my first inclination was, okay, let's use what I know from my Aikido practices, from my yoga practices, to boost my immune system, to get ahead, maybe to develop, maybe I'll work on certain things. And I was engaging with that idea, which is a very kind of ambitious and ambition-driven type of approach that we normally do. And you see it all the time. Use Aikido to sleep better, use yoga to sleep better, use Aikido to this, and different ways of approaching these disciplines to get something from them. And it soon became apparent that there wasn't any traction. It wasn't going anywhere. I was like, this is not working. This is not working. So I reversed it, and I really took time out, and I just spent a lot of time in just basically meeting the body as it was, meeting the body and appreciating the body, and allowing the body to function and to move out of joy. And so I framed it in such a way that I would only do those movements that felt good, felt not that they didn't feel challenging, but that felt that the movement was its own gift, that there wasn't anything I was trying to get from it, that I was doing the movement for its own sake. And it radically shifted, and everything became about just appreciation of the movement, the energies in the movement, the consciousness in the movement, the perspectives, the different things that were showing up. And suddenly something opened up that hadn't opened up before. And I was realizing, I was sitting in the garden, I was just doing some basic kind of spontaneous, you could call it Qigong yoga. And it wasn't framed at all, but it was just in this allowing for the energy to be true to itself. And it was like suddenly waking up, and it's like you're waking up in a field of energy that that spoke the same language, that spoke the same vibration, and the body suddenly linked up with the environment that I was in. We live in the mountains, and it was this kind of opening. The body was opening to itself, And it was something that we had talked about before, and it was something that I always knew was true, and it felt it, but I never really tasted it. And until this, at that time, in such a deep way, that it became obvious that to reclaim the language of nature, to get back to being able to feel that, there was this the language of the body, which needed to be allowed and opened up to. And these languages are very close, if not the same. And it was an allowing of something, that a deeper allowing of something that had been present before, but it had been only operative in my art, in the yoga, in the Aikido. There was this ability to allow the body to be free in the art. But this was kind of allowing the body to be free, period. And it was a dialogue that suddenly opened between body and environment, that created a resonance between these two objects, that it was obvious this is one system. It's not two systems, it's one system. And no amount of discipline or technical knowledge or attempting to apply something was going to get me there. It was all about what we'd spoken about earlier, about allowing for that which is inherent to come to the surface and be, in a way, true to itself.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about that, you know, any situation that occurs is going to demand a different response.
Mm.
You know, so that's why if you get fixed on techniques and things, it's not really going to work.
Right.
You've only got your techniques.
Right. Yeah.
You know, whereas like what you're describing, something was being called for. Mm-hmm. Literally was being called for, and you allowed it.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? And I think that's what it's about, really.
Yeah.
It's about that.
Yeah. And I think specifically in question with if we're looking at the question of the collective and global crisis that we're facing with regards to the environment, with regards to our position in relationship to the world around us, it became obvious that so much of what our solution making was attempting to do was to bring the cognitive in an attempt to modify or apply mechanical solutions or technical solutions to the environment as a way to solve that. And it suddenly struck me that there's a dynamic and dialogue between literally the content of this nature, this body, and the content of our external bodies that allow for a resonance to occur. And it's not something that can be needs to be necessarily analyzed by the mind, but a recognition that exists. And that recognition is a tremendous support structure that I had not actually truly appreciated until, and still don't truly appreciate. It's uncovering in its exploration, and it's much bigger than my mind gives it credit for.
Well, I would imagine, quite honestly, that at least in the West, you know, that's where we're at, is to start to uncover that, what you're talking about.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think that's what's being called for.
Yeah.
This kind of resonance with what's other than human.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In all forms, in all, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's what's being called for. And I feel the same. I feel like I'm just, you know, I'm kind of like exploring things. I have no idea about them. You know what I mean? But I'm going with it because I feel like, you know.
But I think in this domain, that it's always going to be like that, because wherever we open ourselves to the fundamental emerging nature of our experience, it's always new. Well, it's not just the insight in meditation, but literally the fundamental creative impulse that flows through our bodies, as who we are in relationship to the environment that we're in. And we're always in that environment. Even in the middle of an urban setting, we are still tied to the vibrant nature of of life itself that permeates the planet. Because if we weren't connected to that, we wouldn't survive. We exist in a collective network of information and intelligence and nutrition and dynamic creativity that is part and parcel of who we are, both as, at the level of our individual, but the level of our collective. And if anything, this last year and a half of feeling the impact of the pandemic on our collective psyches points to that systemic experience of who we are, and that we exist as a system, and systems within systems, so to speak, with our individual state or our immediate environment, to our larger social and even economic environment. There's no place where we are not, in a way, touched and connected with the world around us, and to be able to open to that, not just conceptually get it, go, yeah, I get it, it's a nice thing, I intellectually understand it, and to go beyond that intellectual understanding and experience that at the level of insight and meditation is a wonderful experience, and powerful, and does give that experience of freedom and no limitation. But to experience that at the level of the body, and to feel that immediate connectivity with nature itself, with the earth, I mean, the tangible ground, and the growth of the trees, and the movement of nature, as being part of our inherent system, and the intelligence of that is connected to our own system, and there's no separation, is something that I feel is extraordinary to appreciate, and not even necessarily to use it for any type of goal-oriented type of process. Although I think, searching for solutions for these questions, or this area, brings a lot of support. But just the appreciation of it and the beauty of it is a gift that I'm very grateful for tasting, at least just tasting a little bit of.
Again, I have a feeling it's something. The word practice doesn't quite go with that, what you're talking about, but we can give ourselves, you know what I mean?
Right.
More to that, because that's the only thing that that's made sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
For me personally, after I got sick in the States, I decided to come back to Wales to be in the nature. And I've just sat in nature for a year and swam in the rivers. I wanted to get inside, the rivers. I wanted to get in the water. Right. So all through the winter, I was in the waters, and I wanted to do that for no reason.
Yeah.
Honestly, I mean, I know it's good for your health when you get in water,
Yeah.
but I wasn't doing it for that. I was doing it because I wanted to be in.
Yeah.
And yeah. And yeah.
It's a strange experience. It's a lot like what's the word I want to use? Recalibrating the system, in a way of bringing it back to a default setting of just dropping into nature itself, where the body is what is around it. I'm not a foreign object in nature. I am nature itself. And going in cold water and finding those sacred spots in nature to reclaim that, such a beautiful experience.
And it is very interesting. It's very interesting because we're so used to appropriating everything. You know what I mean? That part of me even wants to appropriate that. but can I just let it? Can I just, and I think about the indigenous people, they live like that, but they're not claiming anything.
Right.
If anything, they're doing, I think very much so their thing is that they're just there to look after while they're there.
Right.
While one is alive, you look after what you're with.
Right.
You know what I mean? So especially in the Western ways of thinking, it's just insane how we want to appropriate and make something out of everything we do.
Right.
And there's a quality in there that I feel like I'm just sniffing now. I'm not doing that. So you know what I mean? No, it's like, and it's very difficult because we're used to either scientifically proving everything or claiming things, or I don't know, creating structures out of things that we can, form techniques that we can sell to people, and all of this stuff.
Yeah.
There's a quality in there that I just feel like, I don't know,
Right.
there's a smell of a quality that's very different to all of that.
Yeah.
And I think we've been so trained like that, this other way, right, that even with the planet, there was part of me I could feel was being passive, was waiting for some of these brilliant people to kind of solve it. They were going to solve it by, I don't know what, shooting things into space that, whoopsie, down, sorry, shooting things into space that was going to make everything, all of these brilliant, then they're brilliant, but there was a passivity in me. Sorry. There was a passivity in me that I realized that no, I have to follow my own, and then the one thing I do know is that we're all very important in this. We're all very important. But the demand is, like, what I feel life is demanding is that we all find our own responses to it.
Right.
You know what I mean? And
It's perfect. It's perfect what you're saying. I think there's a movement from this idea of that we own, that we own the environment, or we own the planet, or we own the land, and relinquishing that feeling of ownership, but moving to a level of responsiveness with it, being responsible with it in a certain way. And what you expressed for me, the word belonging comes up.
Yeah.
That this really gave me the feeling I belong in nature.
Yeah.
And that window for accessing that feeling of belonging was through the body. Through my mind, through meditation, there was a great sense of belonging to the cosmos, or the belonging to life itself. But the actual sense of nature always felt a little bit kind of foreign. It was this sense of that through meditation, I understood the emptiness of all things, and the unity of all things, and that the sense of life is one, and the source of life is one. But belonging in nature, belonging in the actual field of life, didn't come across until the body was allowed to take its role, or take that position to be the body, to actually literally be myself at the level of the body as a piece of this beautiful process, as a piece of this event that we're seeing, the world of nature, to be, when you see a tiger walking through the jungle, or a bear, or whatever, they're naturally beautiful. They don't try to be beautiful, and they're not concerned with how they look. They just naturally are who they are, and they belong. There's this great sense of belonging. And I've always missed that. I've always felt like, I wish, there was that quality. I could have that quality of belonging in nature, and wanting to acquire that was always the sense of, oh, maybe I need to go study with a Native American and do some tracking, or to go maybe do some ayahuasca in South America, or blah 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 blah, find some trick in order to connect with the web of nature. But it's here. It's already this. The body, it is part and parcel of that, and that window of just simply allowing that was an extraordinary discovery that I think helped complete something that I'd been looking for a long time. So that's it for me. It's that realization of belonging into in the event that we find ourselves in. And I think if anything, I probably would like to approach that in that work that we're planning on doing in October. But I don't know, do you have something that you would like to say with regards to how that functions in your work, how that functions in your process in terms of working with people, and how do you bring that about?
Well, sometimes, well, for instance, as I kind of went through my training, and then afterwards, and what I explained at the beginning, when I'm actually starting to see and feel, as I became more sensitive, was to feel all the things that were wrong.
Mm.
You know what I
Mhm.
mean? To feel all the things that were wrong. So
Mhm.
feel all the things that where I didn't want to go.
Mhm.
And that included my personal history of my
Mm.
father was alcoholic and all this, you know what I mean? So
Mm.
learning like what I didn't want to, how I didn't want to affect other people.
Mhm.
So it was very much learning from that, interestingly enough. And then, of course, you have to, you know, like as a teacher, you have to actually, you know, offer things.
Mhm.
You have to offer forms and things. You have to offer. And I always found myself coming up with ridiculously simple offerings.
Mhm.
And I always felt that this is ridiculous, you know, this is ridiculously simple. And they were like the most kind of like simple responses
Mm.
to what I was feeling and sensing. But then what was really interesting to me, so you know, and I would also go through a lot of fear of like giving these things because they just seem so ridiculous.
Mm.
You know what I mean? I was, but people would really get something from them, which blew my mind, right? Blew my mind. So that's what I've done all the way along. So right now, what I'm doing the same thing. I'm doing the same thing. So I'm trusting a little bit the investigation that I'm going through, which is
Mm.
very much akin to what you're talking about, going into nature and just being. And then and then coming up with a, you know, I'm coming up with kind of like very simple forms around doing that.
Mm.
And
Mm.
that's kind of where I'm at, you know, but
Mm.
I never feel confident with any of it.
Mm.
So in a way that saved me because I've never felt like I've got some system I can sell everybody.
Mhm.
Even though I give workshops and all, and people do pay to come to workshops, for which I'm very grateful for. But you know what I mean? I'm not like having people like train in my you know, in my techniques.
Right, right. The
But you
Kirsty
know,
the Kirsty Simpson approach. You can be a
yeah, no,
facilitator after.
no way.
Yeah.
Because this it's too simple. What I'm trying, what I'm my responses to. Anyway, so I, you know, I just so that I guess interestingly though that you talked about that because it is what where I feel like I want to go now with my work.
Mm.
What it's been up till now has been a lot more to do with people coming together
Mhm.
and the principles that underlie us coming together in learning how to like touch respectfully,
Right,
how to be together in respect and
right,
peace in a way. You know what I mean?
right.
It doesn't mean you don't. You can use very strong energies, but
Mm.
underlying that, you know what I
Mm.
mean,
Mm.
is a ground of respect.
Mm.
But like right now, I feel like I'm going much more into this interest in really opening up to what's other than human
Yeah,
and finding ways to do that
right,
through my physical practice, which is
right,
I'm gonna, you know, I'll explore a little bit of that in the workshop.
right,
So
right. I think we had actually touched upon it a little bit in that workshop the last workshop we did, and I wanted to go into it more
uh-huh.
with you. And I think there's a tremendous possibility in a lot of uh, valuable territory to explore and to appreciate by opening that, not to exclude the connection with the other, but to go into the connection with the other and then expand that circle to include the connection with the environment, with the space beyond just the relationship, but the relationship with the context itself. And I wanted to make a comment because you said, you know, in being in participating in some of the exercises that you taught that last time we were together, you offered the things that you offered were very simple, but they were not easy. They were
Uh-huh.
really challenging. And the approach was so simple, but the challenge in being able to allow oneself to really go into what you were pointing was really holy shit. And it was a beautiful holy shit, but it was still holy shit. And so I just want to make a disclaimer there that simple does not mean easy,
Uh-huh.
and it doesn't belay the profundity that you were sharing, which was really great. It's really great. But I think there's a lot of possibility, I think, with regards to how our experience is reflected immediately through the body in our relationship with the other and our relationship with the environment, which I think is such an extraordinary place to play, and such an extraordinary place to to give attention to, and to appreciate that there's no gap in a way between that contact between self and other, and how we relate to that relationship, while being aware of one, our individuality, and yet at the same time our collective experience too, that we are, I am I and I am we, and to have that experience of both simultaneously, I am I and I am we, um, reflects to a large extent, I think, the perspective that is so terribly nourishing and supportive, for giving us, this the context to explore how we can respond in both as individuals and as a collective, in ways that both honor both sides. It honors the I and it honors the we. It's not a sacrifice of the I for the sake of the we, and it's not a sacrifice of the we for the sake of the I. It's an honoring of both, which allows for something extraordinary to occur, and not a loss of my individual voice, at the sake of the or for the sake of the collective voice, and not a denial of the collective voice as a way to honor the individual voice. And I think therein lies for me an extraordinary place to play and to enjoy. Yeah.
So I guess it might be nice to open up to some questions if anyone has any.
That's exactly, I was thinking that. You're
Just
right.
before we go there, we did want to say that one thing that, because I've known you, Patrick, for many years in different contexts, but we never taught together until we taught the last workshop.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I really, really appreciated was, you do come from the form of Aikido, and you know what I mean? Aikido is quite formal in a sense. But I would also say that you're finding simplicity in that form. Do you know what I mean? Which again is challenging, but that gives the potential for really deep insight into some of these questions that we're going into. And what I saw was that, for instance, dancers that are used to like really kind of like just exploring freedom and all that, it was challenging for them to go to the simplicity of that form. You know what I mean? But
especially under the context of conflict or pressure, which is that martial nature, which demands such kind of like, okay, I really need to step up. That is a very beautiful part of Aikido, and yet,
but it's a beautiful part of Aikido, because I mean it's so intrinsic to life.
Yeah.
Because we learn from conflict.
Yeah.
Actually, we learn when things are challenging.
Yeah.
When we're actually butting up against something.
Yeah.
And I felt that you have a great skill in taking people to that place. Once people get over maybe some resistance to actually just really simply applying themselves, which is in a way it's similar to what I do, just a different. So that was one thing that I really, really appreciated. And therefore I thought that the two ways that we teach really can complement each other. And the other thing is, you personally, I really felt it was amazing as an Aikido, like you talked about at the beginning, Aikido masters really set themselves up. Do you know what I mean? And they're somewhere in this hierarchy. And I felt like you don't do that. You're a master of what you do, but there's a tremendous openness to give yourself, like, for instance, to the things that I was asking.
Yeah.
You're not a dancer, and there you were, fully participating. And I just found that very moving, actually, like very moving. So so I really appreciated that.
And I think the feeling goes both ways, and it's such a wonderful place to be, and not to go too far to this, but to meet somebody of your caliber and your skill level, and to be able to have the openness to collaborate in a way where we approach the unknown and we allow ourselves to be new together in what we're bringing. That's really wonderful. It's very rare to meet that in another teacher, and to be able to kind of collectively or collaboratively co-create something that feels quite unified and quite integrated together. And So I'm looking forward to our next collaboration in October, and I think it'll be a continuing journey that we started off with in our first event. So yeah, so I think let's see if we have if we can be open for questions. And what we would like to do, I know that we could ask you to speak directly, but I think it'll be easier for us, if you don't mind, to post your questions in the chat, and I will read the questions to out loud for Kirsty to reflect on, and then perhaps we can respond to what you would like to ask. There's one question here. Thank you for the dialogue. What is your reflections on movement skills? And I'm not quite sure what that means, but Kirsty, do you have?
Well, I think it was, for me, it relates a little bit to what we were saying at the beginning.
Right.
It's just helpful to have some sense of form, I think it is, you know what I mean, that supports the moving body. But I mean, we were designed to move, you know? I mean, I always find it very funny. I always find it very funny that, for instance, you can have somebody that's been trained in ballet, and it's probably the same in Aikido, you know, who looks incredible in the balletic form and that, but you try and get them to do something simple like lie on the floor, and it's like, it's amazing. It's impossible to move outside of their form. So there's a level of movement skill that is just inherently within us. We are designed to move. When you look at how we move, our joints and everything, we're actually designed to move.
Right.
You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's to my mind, a lot of the times it's getting us to move away from ideas of what we think we should be doing and what we should be looking like, you know, which is ideas that we've been fed about what, let's say, movement is, or what dance is, or something, you know, which just screws us up. Basically means that we're enslaved to trying to you know, find these to trying to fit into somebody else's idea of what movement is, to actually starting to explore our own bodies and how they intrinsically move, and being in awe of that. And that will soon take you somewhere pretty amazing. And then you can learn along the way, like we were saying earlier, very simple, you know, skills, which, you know, I'll always fold those into what I'm teaching. I give very simple skills, for instance, of how to fall into the earth. Really important. I think that's something that actually all people should be taught, especially as we get older. We should be being reminded of what it is to actually fall into the floor, you know, relearn or whatever, so that when we fall as we get older, we don't hurt ourselves. Those kinds of things. So those kinds of skills, simple skills, are important. But
right. I would agree with you. I think at the initial level, because we've been so physically conditioned to hold and frame our bodies in particular positions, and you know, and we do that because society asks us to keep it together. You know, when we get on a bus, we get on a train, when we're walking through the store, there's a certain kind of framing of the body which kind of inhibits its natural expression of its physical power, of its erotic nature, of its sense of space, its sense of freedom. And so we frame it and contain the body. And then, so getting people to learn basic skills as a way to kind of reconnect with the body, I think can be a good initial phase, but it's helpful to remember that we're attempting to reclaim an intelligence which is already fundamentally active. If you look at the way a cat moves, you look at the way a great ape moves, if you look at the way a horse moves, their movement is fundamentally beautiful, integrated, and organically evolves, organically develops through their own play, through their own experience. So
child.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, exactly.
We can't take our eyes off children.
Yeah, I know.
It's
And that
just
it,
exploring.
everything is so kind of engaged.
Yeah.
And if we can adapt, if we can learn movement skills as a way to moving towards that freedom of who we are at that level, which then allows us to dance a dance that we've never danced, to do the movement that we've never done, to be free in areas where we are unsure or don't feel at ease, and but we are still at home in our bodies, comfortable in our skin, so to speak. And if the movement skills bring us to being more comfortable in our skin, not just comfortable in our discipline, but comfortable in our skin and comfortable in our environment, then the movement skills are helpful. If the movement skills are only targeted at developing that level of capacity in that particular discipline, but don't bring us outside of that discipline, then the movement skills may be actually not actually helping us as much as we may think.
I like it very much. You say that they help you be comfortable in your skin, because ultimately, as far as I'm concerned, what all of these things should be related to is life itself.
Yeah,
Otherwise, what's the point? I
right.
never saw the point in becoming a great dancer. You know what I mean? And it being a job. It's my
Yeah,
job.
sure,
I'm a dancer. No,
sure.
no, 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 no.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? What we're exploring is life itself, and
right.
we're exploring it through the body, and therefore, that the movement skills bring us, make us more comfortable in our skin is going to be helpful.
Yeah, I think it's the same in Aikido. If you're developing your skills as a martial artist, but that makes you more paranoid and more uh, more 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 engaged with constantly being afraid or wary of your environment, and being tuned into conflict as in an aggressive or antagonistical relationship. So you're always on the search for a threat. You actually don't feel at home in your environment. You're constantly engaged, almost as if you're walking on a battlefield. Aikido, in my sense, should bring you to a place where you feel at home in the moment, at home in the environment that you're in, to be able to welcome that environment. A sign of power is the ability to welcome that which is outside into your circle of engagement, not to keep it away, but to actually bring it in closer. And so I think that being comfortable in our skin helps provide that kind of capacity, that kind of skill. Can we ask anybody else? Does anybody else like to offer a question? That was one question. Thank you very much for that question. I can't read the name. It's Gun Ephone, but thank you for that question. But we'd happy to field any other questions that people would like to offer, maybe coming from some Aikido people or from dancers, whoever's out there. Please feel free to chime in. Don't leave us hanging. Well, everybody seems to be content with what's being said. Let's see if I can.
We could ask Frank some questions.
There we go. Frank Beaubois is one of our hosts for the event that is coming up in October. Him and his partner Patricia run a beautiful center in the middle of France. It's a wonderful place, and they've kind of are caretakers of a learning center, which is an extraordinary place to visit. And I feel very lucky to be invited by Frank and Patricia in offering a week of exploration along the lines that we've been sharing. But Frank, perhaps if you'd like to chime in and just share a little bit about what you feel we're talking about, and if you'd like to talk a little bit about your center and how the week is going to unfold in October, that would be great.
Good evening. Yeah, thank you for the talk. I was just thinking of something I read recently that kept in mind and relate somehow to what you said is a sentence from Christian Bobin, he's a French writer, and he said, "The game is its own reward."
Mm.
The
Yeah.
game, and I could apply it to what you said. The dance is its own reward. You don't have to ask for something more than the experience. You feed the thing itself. It's
Yes.
enough. You don't have to attend to get something of it.
Yes.
It's just a thought about the context here. We are so an association, and we are around dance improvisation. Our main focus is around improvisation. And we just finished 3 days of practice with 25 person, two of them dancers and musicians. And that was an amazing moment of really intense practice. And we were even practicing in the village. So for us, the importance is to share the practice with practitioner, but also with the surroundings. And with people, as we did in the village yesterday. And in that way, during this event, we suggest to Kirsty and Patrick to have an evening to share a talk, a performance with the audience there, and also to share for the people who are joining the workshop. So there will be during this workshop an event with an evening with Kirsty presenting a performance, hair solo for my mother, and then there will be a talk demonstration by Patrick around his topic, what he wants to share about the practice of Aikido. That's something quite important for us, and it's nice. It will complete the last experience for me, as we didn't have this chance to share your work with the surrounding. This is a 5 days workshop. So it's an immersion process, because we are practicing, but somehow we are also sharing the dinner, preparing the food, having walk around. We are living in a mountain. It's a middle mountain context.
It's beautiful. You live in a beautiful area, extraordinary place.
Yeah, somehow
Yeah.
It's the nature's around somehow. Some rabbits, some people too, some creatures. We have many different creatures around, and yeah, that's part of the context.
Frank, we have a question. Can you give us the name of the village? Where are you at?
Yes, we are in Val-Sivière. Val-Sivière. It's in Auvergne, somewhere close in between Clermont-Ferrand and Saint-Étienne, and it's a really lost place somehow. It's really there's not so much people around, but then we took the chance to build a studio there and start to practice there.
For those people interested, I will put a link to the website that you can click on to on the chat, and you'll be able to get more detailed information concerning that.
Yeah. We were so we had the chance to welcome the first workshop there from between dance and Aikido. So we for many years Kirsty came. I don't know how many times she came for dance and music proposition with Nin, which is an amazing musician. And then there was a question of the possibility to have a research around dance and Aikido, and Kirsty came out with this topic, and we welcome this idea because we are a place where we want to welcome a research process as well. This is a place for laboratory, for workshop, for creative process, So the fact that it was a meeting, and that's what's happened during this workshop, it was really a meeting, a research process that could be unfold in front of us. And that was what was beautiful and amazing too. The vulnerability of the process itself.
Yeah. What was very nice about that was that we really had a good mixture of dancers and Aikido practitioners together. And that was, I was very pleased with it when that happened. That was really great.
And so we shared all the practice. It was also cultural encounter between two ways of consider the space, the way you are in the space, the way you dress. At many levels, it was amazing. A new condition I could feel, and everybody was like trying things as a being. Myself, I was really like,
nice.
And the main thing I remember, it will be another proposition, I know, and before, also after COVID, you know. But there was so much joy in the space. A lot of joy.
Yes.
That's my
That's true. Yeah.
Remember.
Absolutely.
And the
cool
quality of your work, for sure.
Well, the hosting that you and Patricia did and the context of what you've built there is such a great framework for community and exploration that it really, everything came together in such a nice way and very simple and unpretentious, but yet very beautiful and sensitive. So I'm happy for the invitation to do it again and looking forward to it. I do have a couple of questions that have come up here, and so maybe if I can reach out, and Frank, if you'd like to join in on answering any of these, feel free to join in. So a question about the earlier topic. What other movement skills do you think is necessary in life, is really connected to life? You talked about falling. I think it's beautiful because one day when we will fall, our body will already know how to fall. So what other, I would call basic skills would be the skills you might need in your life? Do you think? I think about jumping up, jumping far, getting strongly based, éviter quelque chose, being able to avoid something. Kirsty, do you understand that question? You get that?
Yeah. I mean, again, I think to me, there are skills that I think are, again, inherently present, but we're not aware of them. And one very big one for me is grounding. Grounding for me doesn't necessarily mean just going down. It means the reach between up and down. That's the grounding. The channel is up and down. And often when we talk about grounding, we go down. You know what I mean? And I think there is definitely this reach, this stretch between up and down. Yeah. But I think grounding is a very important principle, skill, whatever you'd like to call it, especially in times like these and going forward from here. We're going to really have to have a sense that we can ground ourselves, which means that we won't be just blown around by life. We won't be just reacting to things that happen, but that we can really stay rooted. So that's one, you know, and I think, let's say that's one principle, but that then has a lot of other skills that connect to it. And one would be understanding the uprightness of the spine, you know, how the anatomy of the hips and the legs and how the arms balance and how the head is balanced on the spine. All of these very simple things really are intrinsic to grounding. So, you know, so something like that. I like the thing of the jumping. I really like that. That's catching the energy of the earth that lifts us. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I jump every day on my trampoline now. It's really good. I have a little trampoline. It's actually what people do, actually. Most people, after they've had cancers, they jump on the trampoline. It's incredibly good jumping for the lymphatic system.
Sure.
So jumping. And that's actually, it has been really great because I you know, I've gotten to an age where I can't really jump on the floor much. I don't quite have the spring I used to have, kind of thing. So now you can get these sprung little trampolines that you can like ride the upward energy of the earth, which is really cool.
Right.
You know. But
Cool.
I do, again, I'm going to reiterate that I think any skills that one learns, I think there should be a context for them, why you're learning them.
Mhm.
They're not just some arbitrary, like, you know, aesthetic thing that somebody's decided is great, but actually it really is connected to a natural sense of being, and, you know, that is going to aid you in some way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know if that.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Frank, do you have something you'd like to add to that? No. Okay. I think that for myself, one of the basic skills I think is a really important one that helps with functioning in life at the level of all of our experiences is acknowledging that in a way we have three centers of intelligence. We have a cognitive center, we have an emotional center, we have a physical center. In a way, the way I phrase it, we have three brains. And to acknowledge these three centers of intelligence and to allow them to dialogue, allowing them to function in their fullness, and that's enhanced when, as Kirsi was saying, when we take our space and open our system up, our body, what in Japanese we call our hara, our kokoro, the heart, and the cognitive center, our mind, each process and speak a different language, and that those languages are important to be able to acknowledge their value and to be able to resonate and allow for them to be expressed fully, and not to be only operating from one center, but to allow all three centers, body, somatic intelligence, our heart, emotional intelligence, and our brain or cognitive intelligence to function within a context of one field of being present with all three. And for me, that would be a life skill or a life skill that's very, very helpful in functioning whatever age we happen to be in. Go ahead.
Quick response to that also is when you were talking before about the balance of the we and the I.
Yes.
A lot of these skills also are what, you know, you might work on yourself, but ultimately, of course, that's to do with your connection then.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? A lot to do with then being able to connect with others or with you know, with the world around us, or
Mm-hmm.
you know, being the sensitizing. I call it the sensitizing of the instrument.
Yeah, nice.
You know, so that we can hear the resonance of
exactly.
of other.
Yeah. Very nice. The one last question from Cliff Bernstein, an Aikido practitioner from California. Kirsti, you said something about not striving for mastery in Aikido, but rather trying to feel the principles in what you are learning. After many years in one dojo, I'm now in a new dojo, trying to master, quote unquote, new techniques. Yet I want to connect more with my deeper body knowledge. Can you speak to that?
Well, I could speak to it, but in a way that probably won't be very satisfying. In a sense that I think that that's actually what I hear in that question is that Cliff is really not wanting something, but is really looking for something. You know what I mean? And I would say that just to keep following that, to keep following this desire that you have to connect with more deeply with the physical. You know what I mean? So in other words, I don't know whether I'm reading this into what you're saying, but you've started to realize that there's a limitation in the ways that you're practicing, possibly in just mastering the so-called skills. You know what I mean? And that in itself will allow you to start to look deeper and probe deeper to find what you are wanting, what you are looking for.
Yeah.
So you know, and that, I mean, that's in a way what happened to me. Then you're on a journey, and then you will start to encounter the people that can help you find that.
Mm.
You know what I mean? That can help you. You'll find it in yourself. You'll find it with help of others. You know, you might find it like Patrick, what you described before. You might find it in response to something that, you know, the illness that you had. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
suddenly you let go and found a deeper relationship with your body.
Mm.
So, and that's going to be maybe not what Cliff is looking for, but that's kind of what my response is. Really.
Yeah. I would mirror that in the sense the deeper this process goes, the less I know, but the more I see in the moment, the more things show up in the moment, but there's less of carrying information around with me that I need to apply. It becomes more fundamentally, the information is what's needed is contained in the moment itself. And there's less of an attempt to bring a body of knowledge into the moment, and allowing for not knowing, for vulnerability, for being created with the moment, so to speak. The intention is important, being clear about what's essential for who you want to be in the moment, being inclusive and somehow compassionate, engaged, whatever word that you bring into that interchange, that helps guide the process. But carrying in information into the process seems to slow the ability to respond. Doesn't seem to increase it. But I think we're
quickly one thing to that.
Please go for it.
Is that what I was thinking? What was coming to mind is to, number one, is really trust your own perception of things.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And actually, don't be impatient. Let's say you start to realize that there's a limitation in a way that you're approaching, or is being approached, the thing of like learning skills or something. There's a limitation in there. I think often we're impatient at that point, you know what I mean? And we start to try and scrabble around to find something that's going to fill up what we feel is lacking. Right. I would say, no, don't do that. I would say stay there and just start really, because that realization that there's some limitation can open up worlds of understanding. Not only about your practice, about what's going on in this world of ours, huge understanding can come from just simply staying and not getting impatient. And it can be frustrating on an emotional level in a certain kind of way, but quite honestly, I've learned so much from the things that I have not, that have been limiting to me in my life. That's where I've learned, how and where to go, but not by grabbing at it. Yeah.
And this brings us back finally, and I think we could address this in the final phrase of tonight, because we're at our time limit right now, is the word evolution. And evolution is, for me, in the way I frame it, is moving into a new version that has not been, that is not a repetition of the past. It's something that is emerging in a new form, a new expression, a new understanding, some form of realization that had yet to be discovered, and an expression of that realization. Where most of the time development is something that we want to repeat the best of the past. We have an idea on how we want it to look. We have an idea, I want to be faster, I want to be smoother, I want to be more powerful, I want it to be the way I envision it to be. And what we're doing is we're repeating what we know. But when we evolve, we're literally taking the risk of moving into a new expression that we have no idea what it's going to look like. And that's where evolution occurs. It's the bringing about of form which has not been experienced yet before, whether it's personal evolution or collective evolution, that's the way I define the word for myself. And if we're going to evolve, we're looking at facilitating or in some level fostering an experience of something that we have not yet tasted, discovered, or understood. And that means risking moving out of what we consider to be good versus bad, and moving into territory that we have yet to experience. And I think therein lies, for me, the direction I would like to move into, not just repeating the skills that I think are valuable, but actually moving into new territory that I have not understood yet, I have not experienced, not expressed yet. And why this evening's talk has been geared towards the word evolving through the body, and not just growing through the body, but moving into new territory, which I think is essential if we're going to be looking at discovering new ways of responding to both our individual and our collective challenges, because we need to do something different. And somehow the body is a window for allowing us to explore that domain, for me at least. Yes, Kirsten.
Well, something, this is like a time, and like a tragic time in so many ways, but in some way it is an extraordinary time to be alive. It is an extraordinary time because life is demanding what you're talking about.
Yes.
Of us humans, it's demanding this. It's demanding that we move into something that we don't know. You know what I mean? So it's actually demanding, and part of our human nature is that we get complacent very easily. We just like to rest, and you know what I mean? And actually we are being forced to this place where we know we can't do that anymore. We know that we're up against, most of us know that. Some of us possibly avoid it, but it is, the potential in that is extraordinary. And I honestly think whether we make it or not, it is an extraordinary potential that I think in all of our different ways, you know what I mean? If we can take up that challenge.
And I think that in many ways, I think a system doesn't evolve unless it's pushed to evolve.
Yeah.
And I think what we're looking at now is a lot of push. And a lot of push on many different fronts. And there's something very powerful about allowing the body to be a context for this experiment of discovering something new, and essential for that discovery. And
I would also like to say, I think that what any of us have lived up till now will be a support for making that next step.
Exactly.
And that's all of us. What we have lived up till now will be. It's not just like you kind of like abandon everything and leap like crazy people. It actually, we're going to be support. We will have to start to understand that what we've lived up till now has been extraordinary.
Yes.
And that has given us everything that we need, to make this step. So
both the wisdom of the traditions that we've discovered, but also the failures that we have done, both individually and collectively. The failures are a huge source of intelligence and information.
Absolutely, all of it.
I'm now, you're posting, there's the link for the event. For those people that are interested, you can just click that link and that will bring you to the webpage of Frank and Patricia's website, and you can get more information. You can contact them directly if you have any questions with regards to basic logistics. They're very capable and welcoming for everybody. And just to answer one last question, Pauline, is it okay not to have skills in Aikido? Absolutely. The only thing you need to come is a body, period. That's it. And if you've got a body, you are welcome to participate, more than welcome to participate.
Even if you haven't got a body, that would be quite interesting. Come along. Who knows?
I'm open for that too. So that's
be with us.
right. Frank, is there anything you'd want to add before we say goodnight? No? Okay.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Oh,
Oops, Frank. Yeah.
Welcome.
okay, great. Okay. Kirsty, thank you for sharing your experience and your inspiration and your joy. I'm inspired to be able to collaborate with you, and thank you for spending some time with us tonight to open up and dialogue about this subject. It's been very valuable.
Well, thank you too. You initiated it, so thank
Yeah.
you very much, and it's been lovely to talk with you.
And I want to thank everyone else for spending some time with us this evening and sharing your presence. And this will be recorded, and I will put it on YouTube, slightly, edited version of it, and we'll make it available to the general public in the next couple of weeks. And so if you are interested, just check on the YouTube channel for Evolutionary Aikido. It will be on there. If you need to, you can direct message me, and I will give you the link if you are interested in having it. Okay. But again, so anyway, thanks everyone for your time, your energy, and your listening. And thank you, Kirsty. Thank you, Frank. And we look forward to seeing some of you in October or at some other time in some other place in the world. And with that, all our best. Take care, and thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Ciao, ciao.
Ciao, ciao.